Hey everyone, and welcome to the second of 3 exhibition games featuring an upgraded Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX League Battle deck. This time around, we're going to rock the Urshifu-Moltres list that you're gawking at right now. Basically, it's a solid upgrade over the vanilla Rapid Strike list, giving you a powerful Dark-type attacker to patch up your spotty Psychic-type matchup. And Moltres also acts as a pseudo-energy accelerator in combination with Energy Switch. So basically what this list is looking to do is power up Gmax Rapid Flow every turn, or at least as close to every turn as possible, thanks to a combination of Rapid Strike Energy and the aforementioned Moltres and Energy Switch combo. You also get some brute strength in the Bird of Burning Vengeance, allowing you to two-shot basically any VMAX with a combination of Urshifu's attacks and an Aura Burn. But just watch out for Path to the Peak with this particular build, because that's going to shut you down right away. And now with all that out of the way, let's jump right on in to Game 2. Alright, so Game 2 in our series featuring our upgraded Urshifu VMAX lists is going to pit our Urshifu-Moltres build up against what I can best describe as INTELEON VMAX Control. It was a really interesting list that my opponent rocked. It's a lot different than the usual Melanie turbos or the old Frostmoth builds that you would see. It relies more on the baby INTELEON engine to kind of fetch some pieces to slow down your opponent, which is really cool. And it actually ended up dragging this game out quite a bit longer than I was initially expecting. It had some real late game staying power, which impressed me quite a bit. So heading into this game in particular, I do get to go first, which as always makes a pretty big deal. I decide to pitch the Moltres and just, get in Urshifu V set up because, early on, Moltres isn't the most threatening thing in the world. It's going to be pretty hard to reach the critical mass of dark energies that I need to really threaten with it, and I don't want to leave it out on the board to get pinged by max bullets or eventually quick shooting shots from my opponent's baby INTELEON line. It's better in the late game to make some pretty good math against the INTELEON VMAXs, letting me follow up a Gale Thrust, for example, with an Aura Burn for a pretty clean KO. But, a little too early on, it could be a liability, especially if my opponent is able to get something like Path to the Peak into play, which we will see my opponent is definitely running. Now, for my opponent's part, they're sitting pretty as well, and they're going to start establishing their board. They, of course, have a Sobble in play already. They'll have their backup INTELEON, and, the most they can do at this point is just go for a Hydro Snipe here, or is it Snipe Shot? Either way, they go for a Snipe Attack on my active Minccino, which, is basically threatening the guaranteed KO later, because now a Max Bullet is going to take it out even if I do evolve it up into a Cinccino. So I'll just go for the Marnie here, more because I need to see some cards, as opposed to denying my opponent anything in particular. And thankfully, I do see the Cinccino off of said Marnie, so I'm able to get a little bit of utility out of it, before it gets taken out by that Max Bullet. And I'm also going to retreat here just because I do want to get the Gale Thrust off as soon as possible and deal some pretty big damage to the active, maybe dissuading my opponent from powering that up, and buying myself an additional turn. And I am able to get at least one Make Do off, which does make a decent amount of difference because we want to thin our deck as much as possible here. And unlike my previous game with Urshifu VMAX, coming up against the single strike, I do prioritize getting the backup V as soon as possible here. So I get a nice clean hit into my opponent's INTELEON V, and now they do have the dilemma. Do they evolve this one up anyways, accelerate to it with Melanie and try to get off a Max Bullet to, set up hopefully a 2-shot later with the help of quick shooting on my VMAX, cut down my draw engine a little bit? Or do they say, okay, the active is pretty much lost, so let me start powering up this guy on the bench instead? One way or another, they have to know that the active INTELEON V is going down, because if I get access to a Rapid Strike energy in the next turn, then Gmax Rapid Flow is going to make pretty short work of it, and again is going to get me a little bit closer to the 2-hit KO, hopefully, on the follow-up VMAX. Although that won't be quite as neat if I don't get Passimian or Telescopic Sight. Because in that particular case, Gmax Rapid Flow plus, let's say, an Aura Burn later in the game will only do 310, which is not quite enough to take out INTELEON VMAX, which sits at 320. And obviously, I am running the Cinccino engine here because I wanted to stay a little closer to the, out-of-box deck that you get. So, no INTELEON package of my own, no quick shooting for this guy, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to use brute force if I want to take out the INTELEON VMAXs in this particular game anyway. Now, my opponent is making a pretty good show of why the INTELEON package is so great, because, you're able to fish for pretty much whatever you want. In this case, it is going to be the Melanie. They realize they need to see the extra cards. They need the energy acceleration to get another INTELEON ready to go. And they do decide that, yeah, this active one is not long for this world. So they're just going to Melanie to it. They will most likely attach to the bench one as well. And look at that. They even get a follow-up ready to go. Just in case anything funky happens to this powered up bench one there. And they can go for another snipe shot here. Most likely they'll target down the Minccino because, again, you want to set up those easy KOs with the max bullet and ensure that in 2 attacks they can completely wipe my draw engine out and hopefully put me in a pretty tight spot. And it is, really good on their part. One of the things that, again, makes the INTELEON package maybe better than the Cinccino one is that you can evolve all the way up into a stage 2, which is a bit more resilient against things like quick shooting, hydro snipes, even Gmax rapid flows, whereas Cinccino pretty much always remains vulnerable on the bench. It doesn't take much to take them out, but again, in this case, I just wanted to stick closer to the original package, and there is some value in being able to thin out your deck and your hand a bit more aggressively with Make Do, and the ability to accelerate energy with energy assist can actually not be understated as well. The Cinccino engine, yeah, it's less popular than INTELEON, but it certainly has its advantages here. Now, for my part, I do see the Rapid Strike energy off the top, which is great, and I can go for a nice fat Professor's Research. And hey, thanks to a couple of Dark Energy in hand, I can, get my Moltres set up for a little bit later. I have access to the follow-up VMAX, which is great as well. So, I'm in a pretty good situation here. Now, I am not going to pitch both of the Dark Energies right away, because I actually want to get rid of that Evolution Incense in hand. It's not going to do a ton for me at the moment, what with pretty much all of my evolutions out of the deck right now. But hey, off of the Make Do, I do see a quick ball to get that final Dark Energy into the discard pile as is. So this does also open up the route for Moltres here. But the more important thing this turn is that I got Passimian into play, which means that now when I go for Gmax Rapid Flow, I am setting up the clean 2-hit KO on the benched INTELEON V, which will most likely become a VMAX. My opponent can't afford to split their energy even further and get that third INTELEON V powered up, at least not right now. So hey, everything's looking good. I can go for Dire Flame Wings, I can start accelerating energy back, and hey, I can go for the big Gmax Rapid Flow, taking out the active and dealing some pretty good chip damage to the one on the bench. And yeah, a nice clean 150. That is beautiful, beautiful math. Now, there was an argument here maybe for taking out the Drizziles instead, because they actually end up frustrating the game once they evolve up. Mostly because the stage 2 INTELEON, at least the one from Rebel Clash, I believe, has more HP than I can, damage I can deal with Gale Thrust. I think it's sitting at 160, which means it'll always survive by 10, and without access to quick shooting of my own, they could actually stall me out or get in a nice 120 chip on my VMAXs if they really wanted to, with their baby INTELEONs. Yeah, and obviously giving my opponent access to that pretty consistent search is not great either. That's one of those things. It's always an argument like, hey, do you maybe take those out to deny your opponent easy access to a lot of their cards? Because decks that do run the INTELEON engine, they tend to run fewer counts of the cards that they search for because, you don't have to run the higher counts thinking I gotta draw into these, you can search them out. So by taking out the baby INTELEON pieces, you basically deny your opponent that, and then they have to hope off of their research or their Marnie, for example, that they see what they need. But in this case, the Drizzile gets them everything they want. They have the boss. They can bring up my Passimian to prevent any pretty aggressive bench play. And now they're going to make pretty short work of one of my Cinccinos and the Passimian as well. Maybe, there's an argument for hitting into one of the VMAXs to give yourself the easy 2-hit KO, but either way, I think my opponent knows that at least this VMAX is not long for this world, so they want to kind of just, I don't know, slow down my engine a little bit, which might have been the better route to take, on my side at least, taking another engine instead of going for the big guys right off the bat. But hey, thanks to Moltres' ability and an extra dark energy in hand, I've got the Aura Burn here, which means I'm sitting pretty. I'm going to take a nice 3 prizes and put myself very, very close to closing out the game here, but not as close as I actually thought I was at the time. So hey, I'm just going to go over another make do, kind of thin my deck out a little bit here. I will recover the one Cinccino line here with the Ordinary Rod, and then I oddly grab back a Fighting and a Darkness Energy with it as well. And I think I just wanted to be ready for the late game just in case it came up. And I kind of thought, honestly, that the game was going to be over the following turn. So I thought, hey, it's not going to kill me to put these back right now as is. But anyway, I go for the big hit here. I get to take a nice 3 prizes off of that INTELEON VMAX. And now my opponent is in a bit of a tough spot. And if I had access to boss, for example, and they didn't evolve up both of their Drizziles as they're going to, then that would be a pretty clean KO that I would have access to. Or I could just go for an Aura Burn and take out an INTELEON in the active as well. That certainly would have been an option too. But again, it's not really the way things are going to go right now. My opponent is going to be able to drag this game out quite a bit here. Because, INTELEON can give you what you want, and they're about to have the means to slow me down quite a bit. So I'm just waiting to see what they grab off of these Shady Dealings. In this case, they get to grab 2 trainers, which is super, super powerful. They're not going to be able to get an attack off with this turn. We don't have Aqua Patch in the format, and, it doesn't attach to the active anyways. You can't Melanie to the baby INTELEONs. So I do wonder what they're fishing for here. I can't remember if this was Path to the Peak or if they grabbed a Melanie to start working on their benched INTELEON V. But either way, they have access to pretty much anything they want in their deck there. And yeah, there's Path to the Peak and Boss's Orders, which is not great either. So now they can force up something that's not going to be doing much in the active. You could actually force up an Urshifu VMAX, and assuming I don't get off the energy switch, Dire Flame Wings combo, there's no way for me to Gmax Rapid Flow either. And Path to the Peak certainly makes Gmax Rapid Flow off of Dire Flame Wings a lot harder too. So my opponent makes a pretty smart play here actually. They pull out the INTELEON and then evolve back up into it, thanks to a cool little combo you can do with Scoop Up Net. And that gives them access to an additional 2 trainers, which is really, really nice. They did bench the Sobble again, which in hindsight for them might have been a bit too risky because it's an easy prize I could take. All I would need is Boss, but with 2 Crushing Hammers incoming, oh boy, they certainly have the means to dodge the KO next turn. And, obviously they're going to play those down pretty quickly, Crushing Hammers being the wonderful, wonderful cards that they are. And they're going to be able to strip my Galarian Moltres V of some energy, which I won't be able to accelerate back under Path to the Peak. Now they do miss 1. They're going to go for the second one here. I think they do hit this. Yep. And then if they evolve up, they can also Hydro Snipe an energy back into my hand. And then again, I'm not going to have much going on with the Moltres here. Now, I do have the Tower of Waters in hand, which means I can bounce the Path to the Peak as long as nothing funky happens. But my opponent actually ends up going for a Boss's Orders here, and they're just going to go for another Snipe Shot onto the Cinccino, which, in hindsight was the wrong play. They should have actually hit into the Moltres to guarantee a KO off of Max Bullet if they were able to drag it up into the active again. But, I mean, hey, my opponent's still doing really well here. I don't think they have too much to worry about from me this particular turn. At least, I know they don't have too much to worry about because I don't have access to the boss right now. I do have the switching options, which is great, but without that beautiful boss's order as well, I'm not doing much anyways. Now, I do bounce the Path to the Peak here, so I can get a bit more energy in there. I'm able to get the manual attachment to my VMAX as well, So, if I'm able to see the boss a little bit later, that'll certainly be an option. But for now, I just got to get the big hit into the Inteleon V so that a Gale Thrust will take out the VMAX pretty easily once they go into it. And then, I do have enough resources in hand that if I want to, I should be able to pull off the Gmax Rapid Flow next turn and take out the Drizzile if that's the route I gotta go with. Because I won't... Well, no, I could get the active VMAX if I go for a Gale Thrust as well. And as long as they don't bounce my Tower of Waters, I'm in pretty good shape for that as well. But here, off of a Max Bullet, they can also clear my Moltres and my Cinccino, which means I'm down a pivoting option. And they might be able to deny me that as well. It's pretty tricky. The Inteleon engine just gives you access to, so many cards that are perfect for wiggling yourself out of a very specific scenario here. And again, my opponent did really well with that throughout the course of this game, just denying me as much as possible, all of those easy KOs, all that kind of stuff. And they actually go for the Avery here, which would have been really good in the earlier game to kind of take my Cinccinos off the board, maybe force me to scuttle the Moltres. But either way, I really like this, and it's a great little tech against things like Eternatus, for example. It's really good actually against Mew VMAX because you can force the Genesect off the bench depending on what your opponent's got set up. It's a really, really nice card. In this particular case, I just use it to get rid of the Cinccino. I'm like, hey, even if you don't evolve up into the VMAX here, I'm not giving you that easy KO. Granted, they can take out the Minccino on the bench, but I mean, whatever, go for it, right? Now, as long as they don't bump my stadium, I'm actually in pretty good shape here. So we'll see what they're going to go for. Melanie is not an option either, now that I think about it. So even if they Hydro Snipe an energy off of my Moltres, that's not going to matter too much. Because now I can just go for the Aura Burn and take the pretty easy KO. 190 damage is fantastic. It's a nice 2-shot on VMAXs, and it does its job as intended, taking out the Inteleon for game. Okay, so the new Inteleon VMAX from Fusion Strike might be cooler and arguably more busted, but the classic VMAX can still put in some serious work. And it was also a really nice chance to contrast the Cinccino engine with the baby Inteleon engine that my opponent was running. Now, while I could usually get what I wanted through hard drawing, my opponent was able to fetch whatever they needed in a pinch as well. And to be honest, the Inteleon engine is superior, I think, overall, because whiffing any combo pieces in this format is liable to lose you a game. So yes, guaranteed search is kind of a must. But I would actually make an argument that the Cinccino engine is generally a little bit better with the Galarian Moltres build, specifically because you really need that hard discard power in order to get Moltres' ability going. And it never hurts to thin out your deck either, so you're more likely to hit combo pieces later on. Now, if you're not particularly keen on standard, or you're just looking for something even more out there than this particular build, then make sure to check out the third and final battle in this series. I decided to go a little nuts and throw together an electrifying take on expanded Urshifu. So check the description below for a link to that next battle, or click the card which should pop up right now. Oh, and of course, make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I will catch you all in the next game, and until then, take it easy.